Message for all the people crying on our socialism and other subreddits about the ACP. I am literally the executive chairman of the American Communist Party, has Aldin. Although I suspect that 85% of you are Eglin Air Base employees, I'll set that aside. Some of the things I see you guys saying about my party are frankly so bizarre and insane that it's actually surreal. I have no idea why you insist on mystifying my organization or my person. I am a fairly accessible person. I am capable of methodically and systematically responding to every single accusation you level against my party and my movement, including regarding our MAGA communism slogan. There isn't a single charge or argument you have that I shy away from confronting or responding to. Not a single accusation, line of criticism, attack, or claim you have. Some of you share videos slandering us, but I've methodically responded to every single one of those videos. Why share only one perspective? You are the ones who find it necessary to repress forbidden doubts that may arise from even interacting with us. You ban us from all your subreddits and downvote to hell any comment which, in good faith, raises entirely reasonable questions and points of contention regarding these absolutely ridiculous and insane claims made about ACP. Fascist, Laraschite, Nazbol, Nazi, cult. It's literally all made-up nonsense. So here's my proposal. I'm willing to commit to allowing you to confront me through any medium, any forum, at any time or place of your choosing, with every single negative accusation you have against me or ACP. If you are able to maintain just a single line of argumentation rationally, logically, and most importantly, consistently, regarding the claim that my organization is fascist, Laraschite, Nazbol, or a cult, I will do you a favor and do everything I can to advocate for members of my party to never post on Reddit again. All you have to do is consistently maintain your claims logically while allowing me to respond. I've seen many excuses for people to avoid debate. Some say that they don't like how I control the medium. Well, I invite anyone to host it themselves. Some say they don't debate with Nazis. But how can you be confident if I'm a Nazi if you can't even bring yourself to listen to what I have to say rationally? You should start thinking critically about whether or not all this hate against the ACP is even organic. It's so thoroughly astroturfed, irrational, based in completely 100% fabricated and made-up claims that you have to wonder whether this is all being cooked up by organic actors in the first place. Let's remember that the majority of traffic on Reddit literally comes from Air Force cyber warfare divisions. Let's remember to think critically about these various silly and absurd claims made about ACP. Is that so unreasonable? TLDR, stop obfuscating and mystifying ACP and myself personally. There's nothing you're saying that we can't thoroughly respond to and dismantle if you stop screaming and covering your ears and just ask us about it. You are free to ask any question of the chairman of the ACP in this thread. No comments will be removed. The AutoMod bot might temporarily remove some of your comments at first, but we will try to quickly approve them as soon as we notice. Baby, don't flatter yourself. The only reason that you personally get any name drops over there is because this brand of socialism of the nationalistic kind is fluid, shifty. You don't commit to one name for very long because once a certain term gains currency, you'll simply drop it, deflect, project, and distance yourself from it. Then rebrand under a new name because of all the baggage that comes with attaching chauvinist pride to a socialistic vehicle by any name. So in the absence of a consistent ideological descriptor, we simply have to use the figurehead's personal name as a stand-in.
We all know where we stand. You and I both know this. Debate me, bro. Tactic is just an engagement tool, clickbait. No debate exists when you use the terms of engagement as a rhetorical rug pull. You'll never admit to following LaRouche, despite expressly referencing him in past discussion forums, because LaRoucheism was already getting thrown around as a common pejorative. You'll never claim patriotic socialism as your own endonym from 2022-2023 because the attempt to sell it on Twitter was dead on arrival. You'll remain ambivalent about incorporating MAGA ideology. MAGA communism is still your term despite the sub-post tag telling me it's not an official party line until MAGA dies in a year or two, after which you'll be able to abandon it, or you could try to double down and make MAGA be your thing. That'd be funny actually. You'll never articulate a clear policy for marginalized identities, viewing the politicism of personhood as inherently bourgeois and holding that all identities are subsumed under ethno-cultural structures of Americanness. You'll never own up to your own bigoted, hateful, shaking in your boots fear of the queer and trans people, despite whole Google Docs and Imager files full of documentation of your party leaders going off on racist and homophobic rage fits. Despite your very own behavior. You won't own up to it because of simple, good old-fashioned plausible deniability. Bigotry isn't explicitly spelled out in your party's official program, kind of a weird bar to set, and Just like your past failed brand names, you'll just deflect and distance yourself from those individuals because they were bad actors, end of story. So let's cut the crap. There's enough bandwidth for everybody, even chauvinistic MAGAs with socialist characteristics. Let left book be left book, stop your people lurking in anticipation of a group takeover, and just keep your own space to enculturate Americana with National Socialist characteristics, whatever that means to you. The United States has been the principal imperialist power throughout the post-war period. For tens of millions of people from South America to Indonesia, this has meant repression, torture, and death, and it was done with the support of the American flag. Many people see the ACP's use of American patriotism as an implicit endorsement of nationalism and imperialism. The ACP is ML, so let's consider the USSR. Early Bolshevik doctrine treated old Russian patriotism as a hostile relic of the empire. The state promoted class loyalty, proletarian internationalism, and distrust of pre-revolutionary symbols. Why should I believe in an anti-imperialist and internationalist party while it's wrapped in the American flag? The ACP is extremely pro-Lenin, pro-Mao, etc. So why does the ACP ignore the conclusions of these leaders on such an important point? The ACP treats the majority of service workers as lumpen without any real revolutionary potential. I disagree with this assertion, but that's not my question. My question is about your strategy. Service workers are the largest sector of the American population, and it isn't even close. How do you plan to build a communist coalition while not only ignoring, but also insulting the largest sector of the labor force? There is the patriotism of the bourgeoisie and that of the proletariat. The history of working-class experience and struggle has just as much of a claim on U.S. national history as the bourgeoisie does in its imperialist warmongering. This is the orthodox Marxist-Leninist position and always has been. The 1776 revolution has always been canonically affirmed as part of the people's revolutionary and progressive history. You can seek to revise that, but don't pretend our position is somehow out of line with Lenin and Mao's. It's identical. The burden is on you to show why it was wrong. So far I'm not convinced by the arguments. That revolution is called a bourgeois revolution for a reason, but it was also a people's revolution. Bound up with the genuine revolutionary sentiments of the broad mass of people seeking independence from colonialism and a semblance of popular sovereignty. Internationalism is a relationship between nations, not between individuals. 2. We aren't insulting service workers. We simply believe that only the blue-collar working class is capable of leading a proletarian movement, which will inevitably draw in and include the service workers. It is about which section should be invested in to lead, not about whether the entire service sector workers can be written off. What is the party's view on religion in society? Does the party criticize the state atheism of the old Warsaw Pact member states? I won't personally go as far as to criticize it, as the historical conditions were totally different. But we respect all major traditional religions, and religious believers are not only welcome but very much active in our party. Why do you think adopting and focusing on reactionary stances like anti-feminism, anti-LGBT, and climate change denial is the way to American socialism? Why not approach conservatives by focusing solely on class issues that they'll relate to? Why bring up those subjects just to bash on them? The Marxist-Leninist position throughout the entire 20th century regarded feminism as bourgeois and completely opposed to the Marxist-Leninist understanding of women's liberation. I have yet to hear a single convincing case for why LGBT issues are somehow decisively revolutionary. They never have been in the entire history of Marxism or communism in practice. Who denies climate change? We reject Malthusianism. And so did Marx. This is actually why people claim we're LaRouchites, because Lyndon LaRouche also apparently was against Malthusianism. It's so fucking stupid. Lenin was referring to what were the equivalents of Zoran Mamdani and AOC in his day. He wasn't referring to people who used mean and harmful words, but people who sold out their principles to the hegemony and to ruling institutions. Whitewashing Marxism of its revolutionary character while being good little servants of the ruling imperialist bourgeoisie. Virtue signaling leftism and Marxism while in practice siding with the powers that be in their day. Just like your pro-NATO left liberal gatekeeper piece of shit idols propped up by the CIA. Notice all the major corporations have no issue with your liberal leftism. Social chauvinism refers exactly to people like yourself. It has nothing to do with being mean culturally. I think he was also referring to patriotic socialists, like you, whom falsify and modernize Marx's works and Lenin's works. No, he was directly and explicitly referring to the social democrats who made excuses or floundered in the face of their imperialist government's wars of predation against other states. He mocked them and called them social patriots, since the first imperialist war was justified opportunistically on the basis of patriotism and defense of the fatherland. Lenin absolutely affirmed socialist patriotism, so did all his corresponding successors, so did the entire canon of Marxist-Leninist literature in the 20th century. But you'd know that if you didn't get your education from Reddit or ProloWiki, you sad victim of deliberate miseducation. I read the texts for myself. I did not go to ProloWiki or Reddit, bad resources, but I am also not the best at stating things, so I will take this text from Marxism.org's glossary as it explains it. Better than I ever could, aggressive or fanatical patriotism, particularly during time of war. In support of one's own nation versus other nations. Now I bring up this term because you appear to be a social chauvinist in your extreme patriotism and Dengist economics, since Deng was boshly a liberal, even MLS know this. Your party's position is a social chauvinist position for the U.S. I've spoken with some of your comrades and they seem to be aggressive patriots. Where is your party chapter in Minnesota located? I didn't know you guys were over here until Evader mentioned it. I was going to ask you this question in my original post, but I forgot to include it. Why do you tolerate AI art and find it interesting? Do you have an art background? To me, AI art represents how capitalism strips all value, freedom, air, and meaning from anything, even art itself. It's a mockery of art, the cheapest imitation of it, and not only that, but it produces its results by learning patterns from God knows where, including pictures of child exploitation material or dead people in the destruction in Gaza. And you cannot opt out of where it learned its patterns from with most big AI companies. What is your response to this? This is theater. By setting the cost of admitting wrongdoing so high, permanently retreating your entire organization from this part of the internet, you effectively deny any opportunity for reasonable debate. You create a situation where you must totally dismiss any and all complaints. Discussion works best when there is no cost to changing your mind, and so this is the poorest possible setup if you want to reasonably persuade people of anything. I've heard that the guy in charge of the ACP does the similar stuff on Twitter. It seems to me like the whole Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro shtick. You can debate stuff endlessly and never get anywhere, but the theatrics of it makes you seem like a logical person or supreme intellect. I don't view it as very productive. Finally, you are poisoning the well by implying those who disagree are part of U.S. Air Force cyber warfare divisions. I can't say I've ever heard reasonable people make such statements, and it very much goes against the idea of a good faith debate. I know very little about the ACP, but what I do see does not spark joy. Strange Twitter debates, this post, and an odd video talking about the virtues of physical fitness and discipline. And reading through these comments, some quite childish behavior and name-calling. I do not find this kind of macho culture particularly becoming of a socialist organization. While the community work I've seen undertaken is admirable, I would prefer it happen without these less savory aspects. I didn't say everyone who disagrees is part of the Air Force cyber warfare divisions. I just refuse to believe that the astroturfed literal nonsense spewed about us all over Reddit can somehow be organic. Sorry, not buying it. I'm gonna start by saying I agree with 100% of what you say. You have a very convincing way of making your points, and you and I come from a very similar background, not literally, I mean I can relate to a lot of what you say, feel. Despite this, the only thing that makes me hesitant to commit to your movement is the way you carry yourself sometimes. For context, I have watched plenty of your streams over the years, and joined a couple of the iterations of your official Discord server. The antisocial aspect of how you carry yourself, and how your fans act really rubs me the wrong way. I'm not talking about confronting liberals, or any of the opinions you espouse, because I agree with all of them. But it seems to me that because you have such great intellect, and a particular wisdom, that it should come with a delivery method that is suitable for it. I don't understand for the life of me, why someone so right, and so wise, acts so bombastically, and feels angered by people who have an inferior understanding to them. A lot of the people I look up to, people like Professor Muhammad Marandi or Max Blumenthal, they might have something wrong with them, maybe they're not doing enough. Or their philosophy is flawed, maybe, but they carry themselves with dignity. If they get angry, they're wise enough to understand and control it. They're tempered, well-dressed, well-groomed, and act serious because their opinions are serious, but they still have a good sense of humor that doesn't go too far or too low intellectually. Are you a self-aware person, Has? Because I can't always ascribe the above paragraph to you. Or your fans, who try to match, often unsuccessfully by going too far, your energy. I am sincerely highlighting that the overly confrontational, easily angered, infantile nature of the way you present yourself alienates me, as someone who agrees with you. You've managed to convince me of a lot, and I also think you can be convinced because for the most part one find you to be intellectually honest. This is an opportunity for me to find out how sincere you really are. Because that matters to me. Trusting someone to control themselves and know how to behave respectfully matters to me. Maybe you can tell me why I'm wrong. I'm open to hear your response and explanation for how you act. That barrage of paragraphs was my first question. My second question is, do you think it's right to commit immoral acts, or excuse immoral acts, if you think there is a greater good at stake? Or should one constantly push themselves to the highest standard? I apologize if this is a moronic question. And I hope to learn more from you. Hello. I'd like to give you an award, unjustifiably smug dipshit who hasn't read Capital Volume 3. Get ready to be fucking destroyed. Since Merchants' Capital does not itself produce surplus value, it is evident that the surplus value which it pockets in the form of average profit must be a portion of the surplus value produced by the total productive capital. Merchants' Capital, therefore, participates in leveling surplus value to average profit, although it does not take part in its production. Thus, the general rate of profit contains a deduction from surplus value due to merchants' capital, hence a deduction from the profit of industrial capital. https://www.marxist.org/archive/marx/works/1894-c3/ch17.htm. The individual capitalist, or all the capitalists in each individual sphere of production, whose outlook is limited, rightly believes that his profit is not derived solely from the labor employed by him or in his line of production. This is quite true, as far as his average profit is concerned. https://www.marxist.org/archive/marx/works/1894-c3/ch09.htm. The unpaid labor of these clerks, while it does not create surplus value, enables him to appropriate surplus value, which, in effect, amounts to the same thing with respect to his capital. It is, therefore, a source of profit for him. Otherwise, commerce could never be conducted on a large scale, capitalistically. Just as the laborer's unpaid labor directly creates surplus value for productive capital, so the unpaid labor of the commercial wage worker secures a share of this surplus value for merchants' capital. https://www.marxist.org/archive/marx/works/1894-c3/ch17.htm. So yes, an individual capitalist or enterprise can absolutely generate a profit while not itself producing surplus value. It can reallocate or redistribute surplus value produced elsewhere to account for its profits. Marx makes this explicit, so much so that it's Marxism 101. Get REKT, literally. You should actually delete your account. You actually came to this post so smugly and self-assured and just got fucking destroyed. How do you even recover or respond to this? You can't. It's over for you, man. It seems as though you focus on capitalists as being exclusively a cabal of usurious bankers. If that's the case, then what do you think of large and small business? Why paint the owners of capital as a shadowy cabal of bankers when it is clear who the owners are in society? Because capital does not arise organically from civil society any longer. There is no social mobility from zero to joining the monopoly financial cartels. Startups can be validated by the system by being given access to generous lines of credit, which, by the way, can be revoked at any time. Small businesses usually do not make profit. When they do, they can hope for subsistence, at best. When able to maintain high demands, they can get loans from banks, which allow them to expand. But they never become economically sovereign in the sense of independent from monopoly capital. If they run afoul with the system, their line of credit can be neutralized, and they will go bankrupt. There is a big myth that anyone can become a capitalist, but that's simply not true. That was true in Marx's time, but in our time, financial power really is truly gate-kept by a small elite. And this is a fact. LMAO, you sure try hard to rewrite history on ACP and its roots. No one should take you seriously as communists, you're just fascists cosplaying as communists. And maybe an op. Regardless, absolute clown show trash. https://cosmonautmag.com/2025/04/praxis-of-alienation-and-the-American-communist-party/. Cite a single claim from that pathetic libelous article and see if it holds to basic scrutiny. I'd love nothing more to dismantle it, I just need to be shown there's a single human being who finds any of the claims made in it compelling. Go on, tell us what you found convincing and believable in it. Let's test if it's total made-up bullshit. Or do you not want to embarrass yourself? What does ACP have to do with Lyndon LaRouche? How are we fascists? Do you think Australia and New Zealand belong to American civilization? It might seem stupid to ask, but the reason for why I ponder this is the fact that, just like Canada, these two states were part of the British Empire and are, of course, English-speaking and strongly influenced by American culture. Additionally, they're followers of American politics, working with the USA in every way just like Canada. Is someone who comes to the USA at a young age, like me, part of American culture and civilization? I came here when I was 1, which means I'm not a natural-born citizen. Additionally, I still have strong ties to my family's culture and speak their language alongside English. Do you think immigrants can be a part of American civilization? What are your views on Europe as a civilization? What are its civilizational borders? Do they exist? Europe has a strong history of nation-states and fighting against the unification of the entire continent, so it seems like something much more problematic than the matter of American, Chinese, and Russian civilizations. If you believe that people should have power, leave this subreddit. Communism is not about parties. Communism is about the working class. For the proletariat to be strong enough to win on the decisive day, it must, and this Marx and I have been arguing ever since 1847, form a separate party distinct from all others and opposed to them, a conscious class party. You call people F******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* I really don't that often, honestly. I refer to the South Park explanation on that word's meaning, anyway. I do dismiss it. Correct, we do want to ban it. What does this have to do with being reactionary? Nothing. On the contrary, advocates for the sex industry are reactionaries, promoting a feudal-type disgusting practice whose roots originate in the sexual slavery of women. In a moneyless society where all needs are provided, for example, people would be free to participate in porn how they want. Yeah, the exploitative capitalist model today makes sex work ripe for abuse, especially when criminalized, and encourages people into it who wouldn't if it weren't for financial struggles, etc. But in the kind of world a socialist would want, shouldn't people be free to do what they want? At the end of the day, what does banning porn do to improve the lives of working-class people in a material way? It seems more like an appeal to Puritan culture or whatever. Also 1. And 2. Are pretty pathetic responses. Gender, sexual identity has been used by the owner class to oppress people all throughout history. You downplay using hateful language that does have an effect, and dismiss a genuine academic study, which is gender theory. If you didn't operate on dogma and made an effort to understand gender theory, you'd learn about how patriarchy and gender norms, roles are a fundamental part of maintaining the current status quo. By embracing toxic machismo, you're a part of the problem. Reactionary. I've got no issue with you op, I'm more of in the DSA camp because actual revolution seems a little LARPy or what old fat dudes with Second Amendment tattoos fantasize about, but politics is a spectrum and DSA and ACP have more in common than any groups that come to mind. But you should admit that the USA is on its way to a constitutional crisis and dissolution as we know it. That's not LARPY, it's actually a realistic assessment. So rather than try to reform a dying system, build a foundation that can survive the chaotic future to come. Somebody posted a Communist Party weekly Zoom meeting at my local library. I thought, hey cool, I'm one of those, I should join. It opened with a song from the Spanish Civil War or something, which slaps actually. But then it was like an hour and a half of people asking obscure historical trivia, finger-pointing about who killed what revolution. And every few minutes this 70-year-old troll would chime in with 4chan nonsense to derail the discussion. He was responded to every time with patience and sincerity. Unfortunately, there was like one guy that was deeply knowledgeable in history and spent basically the entire meeting answering obscure questions and was the only person worth listening to. It was honestly terrible. I volunteer at the Free Grocery Collective down the street. I thought we were going to talk about actually doing things that matter. Rip headstone. What are you doing now in Teens of Direct Action? I don't care about PSL or DSA. What I've seen work on home soil is something like the Black Panthers. Are you talking a similar approach? All you really need to do to avoid the hate is to stop taking over established subs. You take over established subs, then cry when the people who have been posting here before your party even existed protest against it. Just go away. Make your own spaces. Subs change hands all the time. Why are you whining so much about who controls the sub? This is ACP's space, you're welcome if you'd like. But stop pretending you personally had some claim to the sub. There's hardly any established sub we took over, besides this one which was still quite dead at the start. It's grown 10x in traffic since then. Besides this one. Then stop crying when people on this sub push back. It's not brigading. It's people who have been here since before your group existed finally get fed up with the constant ACP filleting. For the most part, no one cares about your cult. It was barely mentioned until recently. There's hardly any that were here since then. I've been here since 2021. This subreddit grew 10x in terms of monthly visits since the takeover over 7 months ago. Vast majority of people complaining weren't here before April 23, 2025. Subreddit was dead before then, it's only been talked about on other spaces as much as the ACP has been. That's bullshit. Downvoting my comments doesn't make what you're saying somehow more true. Reality is, look at the practically non-existent traffic on the actual ACP sub. All your notoriety comes from hijacking existing subs and then slapping your banner on them after the fact. Make your own spaces. Do that and I promise, no one will attack you. You are only being attacked because people are fed up with you shoving your weirdness into their faces. Your 15 minutes of fame are over. It's not cute anymore. It's annoying. You spoke with Kim Iverson and said, there is an agenda at the highest levels of society to basically destroy the fabric of sexual norms in general, when asked a question about the trans movement. I've heard conflicting opinions from ACP members. Is queer liberation counter-revolutionary? Do you think it's redundant with your party's stance on discrimination on the basis of sex, or were you talking about a bourgeois movement using queer people as a front, etc.? Queer liberation to me means restructuring society where the struggle on the basis of gender and sexuality no longer is necessary to prevent things like alienation or oppression. I do not affirm the commodification of gender expression or the over-medicalization of trans people, but I think queer liberation and communism are compatible with these views. Frankly, if I'm left alone to live IDC, I don't need extra resources. I don't mean to distract from class, in fact I think it's an important aspect of the class structure of America that we need to address. Was the definition I provided not enough, or is the question flawed? Is liberation for queer people empty, or is it the framing? Broadly, it would mean abolishing systems of oppression and domination. Edit. I am not sure what you mean by concrete, but I'm sure objective measures exist, things like access to work, housing, food. I'm not totally sure what you mean, concretely. Metrics ideally could be things like access to work, food, housing, and community. But for trans people it could look like building housing for all people who need to rapidly relocate, or workplaces that don't have uniforms so people can dress comfortably. Things that help all people but trans people as well. We can agree to that. I will work with most people on that basis. Do you think ACP members should cater their message in any specific way to potential trans members to ensure trans people know their needs can be met? Can you elaborate how in the world you consider Russia socialist? I'm from Brazil and I'm just spectating from outside, but there doesn't seem to be any left organization party over here that considers modern Russia to be anywhere near socialist. On the contrary, the consensus seems to be that Russia is a capitalist country with imperial economic relations with a lot of countries. I don't consider socialism to be an ideal. I don't believe there exists socialist ideals. I think it's possible for a socialist mode of production to take form inadvertently without socialist ideological leadership. So I don't consider socialism to be synonymous with some kind of ultimate fulfillment of utopia or some kind of dream of moral fulfillment on a social level, but a mode of production distinct from the capitalist kind. This is the square one that must be communicated before I elaborate further. What do you think, Jackson Hinkle wearing Rolex? Isn't it hypocritical to call yourself communist while showing off your wealth? Showing your wealth signify your status as a wealthy man, which makes you bourgeois, not an ally to proletariat. There are a lot of accounts attacking ACP that have the same mysterious history of being dormant for months or years and suddenly becoming active at the same time to attack ACP. Your account hadn't made a single comment for 4 years until yesterday, it suddenly became active. Not suspicious at all. Both Fidel and Che wore Rolexes. Wealth signification isn't inherently bourgeois. Wealth is not inherently bourgeois or capitalist. And being for the proletariat doesn't mean glamorizing poverty. Poverty is not socialism, to be rich is glorious. So you support inequality between proletariat and bourgeois as proletariat couldn't afford luxury goods? My major criticism of the ACP is that you guys can't just do your thing. By this I mean, you guys are free to organize and build up communist momentum freely in your communities. You don't have to shit on people for being liberals or counter-revolutionaries because they participate in electoralism and try to pass tangible working-class policies. Medicare for all would accomplish more for the working class than the ACP has in its entire existence. I guess I just mean that you all seem to dismiss the idea that people are suffering right now, and some of us do actually want to solve some of those problems and at least improve the current system so we can survive day to day. You can maintain your revolutionary MLM attitudes without alienating people with the same motivation. It feels like y'all have more sympathy and effort in courting the right wing than you do for less revolutionary leftists. Bernie and Zoran, for example, may be liberals to you, but they've done more to destigmatize socialism nationally than any communist party. Over half of New York Democrats now identify more with democratic socialism than with liberalism. Just my 2 cents. Dude, we're literally trying to just do our thing and we're harassed, attacked, bombarded and slandered nonstop for it. Part of doing our thing is growing as a movement, and the leftist liberal gatekeepers, and yeah, I'm going to assume the feds as well, went out of their way to hurl a bunch of literal shit on us to make people think we are Nazis or something. To destroy our reputation. I didn't say anything to the contrary as far you being harassed. I don't know why you're being so combative with me. You kind of just ignored my whole point and deflected to victimizing yourself. Feel free to criticize those people for doing that, but I didn't say anything about that. Let me be more clear. We began our party with work. Our goal has always been work. Not antagonizing the left. But when the leftist gatekeepers did nothing but hurl slander and garbage on our name, doing intentional harm to our reputation with the goal of dissuading people from joining us, we really do have to hit them back. Looking at the program, just a couple questions. Does the ACP believe a revolution is necessary for the establishment of socialism? And does the ACP believe socialism can be accomplished on a country-by-country basis? Attention! The user, Daria, blocked me after posting this. They literally are covering their ears and screaming, refusing to listen to reason. I will reply to them here. Please use words correctly and with theoretical sobriety. What fascist oppression of minorities are you talking about? Stop sounding like a 1960s hippie or teenager. Use words with a degree of respect for the established theory that has given them meaningfulness. Fascism is the open terrorist dictatorship of imperialist financial capital. It has little to do with people's sexual habits or lack of approval thereof. I'm sorry, but Dimitrov and the actual people who fought fascism concretely are more of an authority on the meaning of that term than the Frankfurt School or Wilhelm Reich do-nothings. You've been on the internet long enough to know that I smoke weed when I was banned on Twitch in 2022 due to CIA-backed NGOs slandering me regarding Russia. You call me pathetic and a failure. You literally care more about niche little cultural gibber than dead Palestinian children. You're disgusting. You literally consider the culture war more important than stopping genocide or opposing imperialism. If you lived in Palestine or Lebanon, you would most assuredly side with the Zionists because these issues you care so much about really are not prioritized at all by resistance organizations there. And in fact, most take the opposite position as you. Get a fucking grip. Slandering an organization because it doesn't consider virtue signaling about some extremely marginal phenomena in society to be the pinnacle and paramount form of revolutionary praxis is so fucking entitled and immature. Your government literally engages in mass murder worldwide and is funding a genocide. People are homeless, indebted, and literally dying of despair here too. Get your priorities in order. You prioritize your pet niche issues over the lives of Palestinians. If you cared about Palestinians and other victims of anti-imperialist genocide, you would ally with literally everyone and anyone who is committed to opposing Zionism and imperialism. With no terms and conditions or strings attached based on your cultural preferences. You are simply privileged and reject anything short of your own special ideal perfection. Well, guess what? Victims of genocide can't afford such preferences. And need Americans to come together to oppose Zionism and imperialism now. People cannot care about two things at the same time, we all know this. Baby, I was at my college's first anti-genocide protest, grow up. Also, are you saying I should ally with Nick Fuentes because he's anti-Israel? I should ally with one of the biggest reactionary forces because he's anti-Israel? This is a legitimate question. People cannot care about two things at the same time, we all know this. You don't just care about it, you elevate it to an equal level of significance with literal genocidal Zionism. It would be no different than opposing ACP because they did not come out in support of chocolate ice cream over vanilla. So in your opinion, where does queer liberation sit on your list? I don't even know what you mean by queer liberation, so it's not on my list at all. Do you mean keeping them safe from physical harm? If so, I am all for that. If you mean something else, I would love to know. I suspect you mean supporting Democrats to stop Republicans from passing XYZ legislation, waving certain flags, and shouting certain phrases and slogans. Is there more to it than that? I'll take your curiosity genuine. Yes, it means protecting queer people from harm, and allowing us to live lives as fulfilling as cis-het folks. I can't do that now, there are avenues granted to others that do not exist for me or my comrades. The Democrats have fundamentally failed in this regard, and many are willing to disavow queer people to be more electable. Just because I do not agree with Has doesn't make me a Democrat, though shouting slogans is kind of fun in a big enough crowd even if it doesn't accomplish much. Nick Fuentes isn't anti-Israel, that's the thing. He is just slightly critical of Israeli influence on U.S. politicians, he doesn't oppose Israel or its oppression of Palestinians itself. He's also not anti-imperialist, he supports regime change against Venezuela. Your argument literally falls flat upon basic scrutiny of the facts. You can care about whatever you want, but antagonizing, slandering, and attacking people genuinely committed to anti-imperialism because they don't conform to your personal cultural preferences and tastes is disgusting. I doubt you were seriously involved in activism for Palestine. If you were, you'd have to inevitably rub shoulders with Muslim organizations, mosques, and NGOs whose views about culture would probably lead you to think they were fascist Nazbal reactionaries. Nah, the Muslim people I worked with were just people who respected me and sought liberation for all. If you don't believe in that, you're not a revolutionary, just a reactionary wearing a red hat. Also, you've lied, I did not block you, you blocked me though, which is cute. Less than 3% of Ukrainians voted for the far-right party, Russia sits at around 7%. Considering this, why do you claim that Ukraine is some sort of Nazi state? Clearly it's Russia with a bigger far-right problem. LDPR isn't a far-right party, it's quite centrist conservative. Also, I made this partial list, https://discord.com/channels/admi/76539027350060972550148. Health isn't complicated, it's consistent. Start with the basics like drinking more water. Most people walk around dehydrated and don't even realize it. Infrared show. 4H ago. Because the Ukrainian military is already controlled by neo-Nazis, they don't need brownie points in parliament. It's not a surprise to me that most Ukrainians reject Nazism, but Ukraine is literally controlled by said Nazis. I mean, even Zelensky wanted some kind of deal before SMO, and he was pressured into continued aggression by these Nazis. The purity signaling among the left is why workers went with right-wing populism in 2016 and 2024. How can you relate to a construction worker who works overtime and whose partner also has a full-time job so they can afford groceries, bills, and childcare if you can't even see a comrade or potential ally when they're right in your face? How does the ACP understand patriotism in the U.S. context, and what does a patriotic, working-class politics look like in your framework? How do you integrate anti-imperialism with a national, popular program that speaks to broad layers of the American people? How does the ACP understand and position itself toward mass anti-establishment sentiment in the U.S., including currents that emerge outside the left? What criteria guide your tactical engagements with forces beyond the traditional left? How does the ACP situate itself within the broader international communist movement? We have the National Congress outlined in our Constitution, which can replace the entire leadership, including me. Yeah, the party I belong to. Thank you for quoting that. Some might be confused about which party I belong to. You are truly a genius. What are your thoughts on the current state of American labor unions? For more specifics, can you tell me your thoughts on Some might be confused about which party I belong to. You are truly a genius. What are your thoughts on the current state of American labor unions? For more specifics, can you tell me your thoughts on construction labor unions and your thoughts on the SBWU strike? We are trying to unionize American blue-collar workers who have maximal leverage with respect to the real material, industrial and infrastructural base of the USA. As many commenters have mentioned, it has become a regular occurrence on this subreddit, and others, for individuals claiming affiliation with the ACP to have contributed to a fairly unwelcoming and hostile. This has been a failure that has led to needless petty grudges between individuals and communities who have more in common than not. I sincerely hope that ACP's membership strongly consider a more coordinated online media strategy, or at the bare minimum moderation and de-escalation training, in order to facilitate a more attractive reputation. If the broad opinions of leftists is that ACP members online come across as toxic assholes who are difficult to organize with and work with, that's a problem. I'm sure that there is some validity to Haz's claims that some part of that reputation has been due to made-up nonsense, but even if you wholeheartedly believe it to be nonsense, the fact that ACP members are acting in a way that seems to reinforce that nonsense is a problem. My honest expectation, given past interactions with the ACP, is for this post to be downvoted into oblivion and only serve as a reinforcement to the popular perception that engaging earnestly with your organization is a waste of time. I mean, to be fair, most leftists on this website literally demonize the shit out of us in extreme bad faith regardless of any encounters with us. Another ultramarginal political movement that fails because the people in charge are more interested in LARPing and social drama than actually doing anything. What could we be doing that we are not, as a consequence of LARPing and social drama? Do explain. They are detained and questioned at the airport by DHS or other federal agencies for hours every time they come back to America. We actually don't. DSA, breadtube types, and the new gen, leftists, have way more former alt-righters than we do. Where are you sourcing this claim from? We don't have people like ContraPoints who were outright Nazis. But even if we did, so did the KPD, and this was the explicit goal of anti-fascists in the 1930s, to convert people won by fascism over to communism. Do you see undocumented workers in the USA as having revolutionary potential? What is your party's exact stance on them? I know you guys are against mass migration because you see it as a new form of slavery, but do you think working with the people who come to the USA is important? They might, but only after a movement of citizen workers can be built. Undocumented workers don't have leverage and simply can be deported. And to prevent deportations, you need a strong enough base of support among citizens. Ergo, they don't have leverage. Hi. I'm a Marxist-Leninist, pro-AES states, both modern and past, that doesn't support Ukraine. Is obviously pro-Palestine, Iran, and in generally realizes the West is the biggest enemy to world peace and stability, and that has always been, at least since WW2. So we agree on most stuffs. I'm going to be really direct because frankly I can't understand what's your practical take on this. What's your general stance on progressive policies? Do you consider yourself feminists, obviously radical feminism, not liberal interpretations, supporting abortion and women's rights to reproduction? Do you agree with the fight for gay, transgender, sexual minorities' rights in a socialist societies? Do you actually consider your party anti-woke? Do you unironically support Trump's cultural policies? Because I wholeheartedly agree with Wu actual, blue-collar working class, that has being lied by the rich to think the cultural war and not the class war is the important one. And I agree you have to not be a prick with this people as 100% of dumb Western liberals. But it's important for me that a communist party recognizes ideologically the modern struggle of radical progressiveness and the need of intersectionality in the fight against power. And not being genuinely socially reactionary just for the sake of LARPing as Zyuganov. Thank you for your time, in any way. I think these culture war polarizations are just based on the two-party duopoly. These, partisan, single issues, are only fundamental from the perspective of creating artificial electoral blocks that sustain the duopoly. It's just a false dialectic. The Marxist-Leninist position is neither Democrat nor Republican and is fundamentally outside the cognitive mapping of U.S. politics. When you say shit like, political correctness is bourgeois, and your party have a nervous twitch about recognizing the spectrum of the human condition, homosexuals, trans, race, your guys couldn't even seriously defend their sad position on the indigenous question of the true Americans living within the United States. Just know that actual communists see you, and you kinda look like a tin pot Mussolini, mate. This video from a true revolutionary will aid you in your theory if you're serious. Red pen also. We can't defend our positions and have nervous twitches? How would you know that, when none of the influencers you learn theory from are willing to actually confront us about anything? I'm still waiting for a rational argument from an ACP member as to why pornography and sex work should be illegal. Thank you. Who run our Marxism and why they have no revisionism rule? Why not define revisionism in any way? So, basically that mean that only their version of Marxism is a Bible and no changes could be made? No debate could be. Any suggestion of forum where Marxism can be discussed in a good fault? The mod also runs Communism and Communism 101, been banned from all three. They promote Sakai's settler thesis that America doesn't have a proletariat and must be abolished lol. This subreddit is probably the best place to discuss Marxism. R.L. Radical is an excellent space that is growing but small. The creator is very dedicated and I even found him in this comment section. You're right, something that sounds immediately absurd, otherworldly, and ridiculous doesn't at all deserve to be taken seriously. You would have been such a virtuous individual in the 1700s when it was absurd to say that black people were human, right bro? Let's not think critically about anything, let's just dismiss them according to our preconceptions. By the way, why should anyone care about your preconceptions when they have not amounted to any real-world success for socialism in decades? How do you define productive labor and do you consider service workers who produce surplus value for capital to be lumpenproles? Labor that valorizes capital is productive. Valorizing capital means that the surplus value generated by the labor has to actually be the source of capital expansion rather than speculation or credit. So if a company is making profit and it has wage labor employees, that doesn't mean said labor is producing surplus value. It can also be counted as a mere expense of production paid out by revenues whose source is external surplus value. Marx writes about this in Volume 2 regarding commercial workers. You and your party's anti-capitalist rhetoric is disturbingly similar to that of right-wing anti-capitalists, who rant about globalists and such as dog whistles for Jews as part of the age-old tradition of deflecting anti-capitalist sentiments towards a minority to protect the actual people at the top. This isn't about tone policing, the issue is not the tone but the fact that you are using rhetoric which appeals to people whose idea capitalism is a bunch of hook-nosed bankers rubbing their hands together while plotting to destroy Western civilization. Your messaging in general is essentially going to right-wing, anti-elitist, MAGA types and saying, we want the same things, when that is just not true. Right-wing populism is deliberately made to sound like communism, but it couldn't be more different. When they talk about the elite, or the globalists, or the bankers, they aren't talking about the capitalists, since the capitalists are who say those things. They are usually talking about the Jews, and so if you want to get someone on board with actually opposing capitalism, you need to first get them away from that line of thinking and push them towards seeing who is actually in charge. The solution is not to simply absorb them into the movement without addressing that their anti-elitism is not the same as your anti-capitalism. There's no issue with trying to recruit from angry right-wingers, but in order to do that you need to first shift them away from their right-wing views. You can't just go, you hate the globalists, I hate the capitalists, we want the same thing, since those are fundamentally not the same, and ignoring this will lead to your movement getting infested with Strausserists and Nazballs. My question for you is how you intend to stop this from happening, since people on this sub seem to be of the view that you can simply absorb right-wing populists as is. Apologies if this comes off as needlessly combative. I recommend you look into Ernesto Laclau's ideas about populism, empty and floating signifiers, etc. But essentially, vague populist terms don't necessarily imply knowledge of Marxist theory, but if you are a Marxist then yes, when people talk about elite, globalists, bankers, they really are objectively talking about the capitalist class, even if they don't have the theory to understand what they are referring to. The ability for populations to spontaneously recognize an antagonism between the people and the hegemony does not depend on their ability to grasp or comprehend Marxist theory. The goal of Marxist theory is to understand and make sense of the real antagonisms of society, not define their terms and conditions. Attempting to control the terms and conditions of struggle is nothing short of metaphysics and idealism. A class struggle is either objective or it is nothing. Wanting to control the terms of a revolutionary or even populist struggle based solely on theory is vain and un-Marxist. What was the slogan of the Bolsheviks? Peace, land, and bread. How do you counter arguments that Marxism has led to the death of millions of people in the past century? How do you counter arguments that Marxism has led to the death of millions of people in the past century? Let's actually scrutinize the methodology used for counting such things. You'll find if you do, these claims are based in wild exaggerations. And also a misunderstanding of how excess mortality works. Using real methodologies for measuring excess mortality at scale, capitalism and non-communist states are responsible for orders of magnitude more deaths. Compare the excess mortality in India to that recorded during the 3 bad years of the GLF in China. India's is larger. Yet these deaths aren't counted as the result of capitalism, but nature. People who are addicted to toxic notions of hierarchy and vanguardism often don't understand how detrimental it is to basic concepts of equality and justice, and don't even bother arguing about the merits of decentralizing power structures. Are you kidding me? You're the one who is wrong for defending fascist Democrats. We are beyond the point of debating whether Democrats are scammers or not. Insulting and marginalizing people with disabilities is very bourgeois, consistent with capitalist ideology. Don't be defensive or aggressive against that criticism. Accept it and change your language or be seen, correctly, as just another sect that fears critique and circles the wagons to protect their tough guy jargon. It actually makes you look weak. What is MAGA communism? Second, is the ACP the same party it was in the 60s when the Soviet Union directed the party? Or is that not true? Why go full communist? Why not democratic socialist? History taught us every time we follow an extreme-winged party, it tends to fail into fascism, dictatorship. By all means, elaborate what I have said and written about Duginism and explain how it is fascist adjacent. Beyond just me mentioning him positively, what do I actually say about him? How am I nationalist? Lol haha. You and your party are about as relevant to serious class warriors and organizing the working class as Bitcoin is to the average dolphin. Agreed, that's why we don't reject new technologies like AI or other advances in the productive forces. This is based on what? Americans never had a history that wasn't one of slavery and subjugation. But whereas most countries see that history as a barbaric past, America continues to celebrate that history. In fact, the very empire is based on the very assumption that America must project power to protect itself. From the formation of the first settlements to the maintaining of forward bases. It's an unbroken chain of identity that is tied to the very concept of colonization. That is an outright falsehood. Nathaniel Bacon successfully united all the races and classes in a rebellion against the British, which only failed because the man died of dysentery and it fizzled out. In fact, the laws that changed the nature of slavery here from indentured servitude to race-based chattel slavery were put in as a response to this rebellion. Sounds like you don't know enough about American history to even comment on it. What do you propose is the way forward for American communists then, if geography, culture and race make it impossible to build socialism in the territory now called USA? Common sense. This is false and a gross oversimplification of Americans as a people. There is plenty of self-criticism in America of the past injustices that the country has done. Things like the civil rights movement are just as much a part of America's history as slavery is. You cannot isolate just one and boil the essence of America down to just that. It's wrong and one-sided analysis. So what? We reject both that assumption and the empire itself. We reject your foolish notion that the entire American project, which is filled with contradictions, can be reduced to the current American empire. You cannot just reduce America to the bad things it has done and then completely ignore the other half of its progressive history. To do that is the height of foolishness and a very poor understanding and analysis of history itself. It's idealistic nonsense. It's not, it's a chain that has seen quite a few disruptions, like the Civil War for example, and plenty of dissent about that identity itself. Again, your entire analysis of America and its history is one-sided, idealistic and incomplete. Will you respond to Dugan's statement that you and Jackson need to accept Nick Fuentes as the future of left-right American populism? You still have a lot of good ideas, and just because you didn't foresee MAGA becoming establishment and America first becoming the heir to Trump and MAGA doesn't mean you have to keep doubling down on MAGA. MAGA communism is outdated because MAGA is outdated. It's time for America First socialism. As long as you call Nick a Nazi or fascist, you will literally just be another leftist. We don't agree with him. Nick is an opportunist regardless of his views, which are already objectionable. He will sell out to the Zionist system the minute it permits him to. He tried to frame ACP for Kirk's assassination. Pretty unforgivable. His racism leads him to support US imperialism. That's a red line for us. You could probably become a reserve, and you would have to read Lenin, Stalin, and Mao. Don't think you would be rejected out of hand for just that. Important to note that our party really dislikes independent intellectualoids who aren't able to subsume their intelligentsia subjectivity into revolutionary work and proletarian class discipline. I mean, the DSA is just the Democratic Party and the PSL is rotten with reformism and capitulation to bourgeois politics. However, looking at ACP program again, looks like it's somewhat Stalinist. Socialism in one country type deal. And very Bernstein-esque, like no revolution necessary, socialism through reforming capitalist state machinery. How about stop banning people after one comment? I'm as left-wing as they come and my real account was banned for one comment and I didn't even say anything about ACP. Billionaires pay billions a year on anti-communist propaganda. You should be doubtful of any and all resistance to a communist party that is actually large and growing. Moneyed interests want you to fail. But how can we know that you are really who you say that you are? As you didn't submit any proof as to your identity in your message, but looking over that for a second here. One of the biggest concerns about your party in this subreddit is that you are using the communist identity that your party has as a cover-up for being fascist. And an issue that I see personally is that replacing the ideology of America, even if it looks good on paper, will cause massive issues for the nation, as America, and most of the Western world. Has built their nation around democracy and capitalism, which means that to change the ideology of the nation, you would have to change the very base of the nation itself. Which seems to be like an impossible goal compared to the tactics of other socialist groups such as the Democratic Socialist, which wants to change the nation slowly, subtly, and by not as much as the American Communist Party appears to want to. Also, sorry for the bad grammar, as I am typing this all out on a T9 pad. He was streaming live the other night on his Kick account, and answering people's questions in a different Reddit AMA, so it's confirmed to actually be his real account, https://videos/56fd23d0-78-4973-8A96-683A9E7478. But why would we disguise our fascist views if we had them, when in 2025, it is literally far more rewarding to identify as a fascist than a communist? This accusation just isn't that well thought out. Why would we want to infiltrate the largely useless and irrelevant, radical left, in America? They're losing badly if you didn't know. Friendly reminder to readers, have a peek at our American Communist for activities of the American Communist Party. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. What's your plan when the party fails to gain any electoral momentum, not to mention revolutionary momentum? You may get MAGA Republicans to agree with you on merit, but you won't convince them to hang their landlords like Mao. You won't convince them Trump wasn't in fact looking out for them. The US can't change fundamentally by simply following the ways that worked for other countries. The mark of a successful communist revolution is one with its own identity. How does the ACP see itself establishing that identity? All I see from ACP supporters are them telling detractors to read Marx and Lenin and a bunch of other texts. I can't imagine this is the same messaging you're giving to these alleged MAGA communists you've convinced away from Trump. We are focused on building dual power in anticipation of a constitutional crisis. We think unrest will define the future of the USA for perhaps decades to come. Our goal is to basically survive this. Regarding Trump, I think many are already convinced he has betrayed what he promised to them, and they didn't need our help to realize this. We know we can't blindly import foreign experiences. So the question is, how do we adapt the revolutionary tradition to USA? Our organize is very dynamic and open to this question, I'd argue more than others. We don't claim to have all the answers, we just claim we provide a framework to discovering what they are in a collective and organized way. That's a reassuring answer that simultaneously doesn't answer my question. Frankly, you are the chairman of this movement, and how you define it now will define it for the future. Depending on your party members to figure out the thesis of your party doesn't seem like a good way to begin the movement. Thank you for taking the time to answer. I was unsure if I would get a response. We would prefer to be certain about the direction forward for the entire nation when we organically gain more experience. Our party was designed to promote experimentation locally and adopt what works at a higher scale. We can't claim to have all the answers without practice. Every failed party still represents work done and minds changed. I'm not sure what the point of asking about their revolutionary potential, as if conceding that a revolution won't happen by the hands of the ACP invalidates anything that they do. Not a combative question, but in what ways, not expecting a thesis, does the ACP differ from Soviet Marxist-Leninism? We incorporate Mao Zedong thought and accept his criticisms of Soviet Marxism-Leninism. We additionally open ourselves to a new synthesis of Marxism-Leninism based on our new era. We don't claim to have achieved it. So in the meantime, we accept the tradition as it has been advanced up to this point. It's adapted specifically to American conditions. Like, don't expect in an ACP America for bureaucrats to meticulously plan the economy with a pencil and protractor or internal passports or anything like that. Hi. I'm a Marxist-Leninist, pro-AES states, both modern and past, that doesn't support Ukraine. Is obviously pro-Palestine, Iran, and in generally realizes the West is the biggest enemy to world peace and stability, and that has always been, at least since WW2. So we agree on most stuffs. I'm going to be really direct because frankly I can't understand what's your practical take on this. What's your general stance on progressive policies? Do you consider yourself feminists, obviously radical feminism, not liberal interpretations, supporting abortion and women's rights to reproduction? Do you agree with the fight for gay, transgender, sexual minorities' rights in a socialist societies? Do you actually consider your party anti-woke? Do you unironically support Trump's cultural policies? Because I wholeheartedly agree with Wu actual blue-collar working class that has being lied by the rich to think the cultural war and not the class war is the important one. And I agree you have to not be a prick with this people as 100 Message for all the people crying on AskSocialism and other subreddits about the ACP. I am literally the executive chairman of the American Communist Party, Has al-Din. Although I suspect that 85% of you are Eglin Airbase employees. Thanks, but not super interested in trading one nationalist authoritarian regime for another. I don't know if this was supposed to be a good faith attempt to win hearts and minds. But it seems a lot more like you got your feelings hurt and just wanted a chance to be the center of attention so you could show everyone how cool you are for using slurs. A bigoted piece of shit defends his bigoted piece of shit org. You're ashamed to socialism, you red fash scum. All the hate the ACP receives is what made me seriously consider the party in the first place. From my experience with the USA in general, I know that whatever is widely derided is worth reconsidering. From what I've read, I reached the conclusion that Has was pretty dedicated to learning, but maybe not the sharpest tool in the first place. But after seeing the exchanges in this thread, JFC, I guess the bar is just in hell. These are some really stupid grievances. Guess I'm joining the ACP. Question for Chairman Has. Seeing all the annoying ankle biters in these comments, what motivates you to keep going in the grand scheme of things? See Zulu. Because LGBT are members of the working class and using dehumanizing language strips them of dignity. Actual communism values the dignity of the worker. Well, using it as like a hateful slur directly toward them maybe. But that's not the only use case for bad words actually. I'm against dehumanizing people. Has. Baby. They must be uncritical followers of that person. Socialist patriotism is what all Marxists have always supported even in 19th century. Read Lafargue here, even referring to the French working class, who themselves were from an oppressor nation and France was imperialist at the time. Contrariwise, internationalists may well call themselves the only patriots because they are only ones to be aware to what extent conditions must improve under which the future and the grandeur of their patrie can and should be secure, in fact, of all the patries who will have turned from antagonistic to solid ones. P. Lafargue, to the working people of France, the 17th of June 1893. Hello you sad, mentally deranged midwit. At no point have I ever claimed to follow LaRouche. The closest I got was praising some of LaRouche's funny policy ideas, like building a land bridge between Alaska and Russia, as well as his general developmentalist outlook. But all of that was stolen from Michael Hudson. What made LaRouche a meme in our community was how he was anti-Anglo. Let's look at 2022, when I spoke at the Schiller Institute conference. Let's have a look at my speeches. What did I talk about? I affirmed the importance of Hegel and Alexander Koyeve. Support for the economic freedom fighters. Support for the continued relevance of class struggle. Affirmation of the importance of the paradigm of ecology. Notice something. All four cornerstones of my speech were directly in contradiction to the entire ideology of the Schiller Institute. This was in 2022. Am I lying about that? What are Schiller's views on Hegel, class struggle, and ecology? Look it up. Who is concealing what? Who is lying about what? Let's hear it. Back in 2022, I gave speeches at their conference defending these four things that directly contradict their entire outlook. And I did it deliberately. You don't know a fucking thing about what those LaRouche people believe. You claim I'm just hiding the fact that I'm a follower of LaRouche. I have hundreds of hours of streams expounding my views on a whole host of subjects. Tens of thousands of written text on my Substack, not even my book, numerous public appearances. What of Mr. LaRouche's agendas am I fulfilling here? Where is LaRouche except your own sad, pathetic, mentally ill millennial head? The actual reason I became more explicit about how stupid I think LaRouche is, has nothing to do with it being a pejorative, but because I no longer had to be bound by diplomacy toward Schiller, who became openly hostile toward ACP. I also really did genuinely learn how he stole everything we thought was worthwhile in his works from Michael Hudson. You claim this is all a cover. Show us the fucking truth then. On what basis is there a conspiracy? Where? How? What is missing here? What am I leaving out? When did I fucking sell patriotic socialism as an endonym? The earliest use of this term by ME on Twitter was in November 2021, long after it was a PEJORIATIVE invented by our enemies to label US. I did not fucking invent that label, I simply responded to their pejorative. Get your fucking facts straight. Two halves. Here's one of my earliest tweets on the matter. https://x.com/infrahas/status/1462899050806747142. They invented this term deliberately to sound like National Socialism. Originally, they would refer to the patriotic socialists, as in not subscribers to the ideology of patriotic socialism, but as in the socialists who are patriotic. The minute they attempted to slap this onto us as some kind of distinct ideology, we rejected it. They invented it, not us. Until MAGA dies in a year or two, after which you'll be able to abandon it. MAGA has already died a long time ago, and not once have I pretended like I didn't invent the MAGA communism slogan. I've explained it in intricate detail and what it meant at the time. I wrote an entire Substack on the matter, which I have no problem defending. What I reject is your fucking lie that MAGA communism entailed support for Trump or the GOP. A clear policy for marginalized identities is empty gibber without meaningful substance. You'll never own up to your own bigoted, hateful, shaking in your boots fear of the queer and trans people, despite whole Google Docs and Imager files full of documentation of your party leaders going off on racist and homophobic rage fits. Despite your very own behavior. What incredible projection. Fear? You mistaken lack of attention to fear, it's so sad. Your own obsessive fixation isn't our concern. What racist and homophobic rage fits are you talking about? What behavior? Bigotry isn't explicitly spelled out in your party's official program. And it isn't. You might be autistic, and that's okay, but that means you are cognitively incapable of distinguishing politically incorrect banter and humor with the literal program and institutional line of an organization. That's not my fault, and I'm not going to re-engineer the norms of what it means to be human to appease your sensibilities. Yes, there absolutely is a difference between your official program as a party and how you as an individual might joke in a more casual, non-institutional setting. Me with mine that you're a Mossad rent-a-mole. Based on literally what evidence? I claim that Air Force cyber warfare divisions are highly active on Reddit, and this is based on evidence. I know for a fact I'm not a Fed, so when I see a bunch of fucking weirdos like you in droves make shit up about my party that has no basis in anything real, I have to wonder whether these are real, good faith actors doing this. Your accusation that I'm Mossad is just laughably fucking baseless though. It literally doesn't have a shred of any basis in anything real. Your post was an epic fucking fail, by the way. The United States